Uh, Welcome to Executing Hybrid Programs. This is the latest workshop in our In the Weeds program here at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. If you are new to NJCH, welcome. We are the state level partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities with a mission to support and advocate for the public humanities here in New Jersey. My name is Gigi Naglek. I am the Director of Programs here at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. Today's Executing Hybrid Programs workshop is part of a program we run called In the Weeds. It's a capacity and skill building series for organizations that do humanities work with a particular focus on people who are new to the humanities or organizations that might not have a lot of professional staff or a lot of staff, period. In this program, Executing Hybrid Programs, we will provide some tips and tricks for turning those well-developed hybrid program designs into a high-quality experience for all participants, balancing the needs of in-person and virtual participants simultaneously, which is quite a feat. And we're going to particularly be talking about how you can manage your tech in these situations. This is actually the second in a two-part series about hybrid programs. Last week, we hosted Designing Hybrid Programs with panelists from the Cherry Hill Public Library and the Newark Museum of Art. You can watch the recording now on our YouTube channel, and it's also available from the In the Weeds page on the NJCH website, where all our past In the Weeds program resources are kept. I will put those links in the chat as well in just a moment. This workshop today is going to feature our wonderful colleague, Joe Amditis, who is the Assistant Director of Products and Events at the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University. He is responsible, in fact, for making in-person, virtual, and hybrid events run smoothly. Joe graduated from Rutgers University in 2013 and earned his BA with a double major in political science and criminal justice before going on to earn his MA from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism in New York City. He was also the co-founder and former director of operations at Montclair's. I got that right, Joe, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I didn't choose the name.
Exactly. And I always feel like I'm about to say it wrong. Montclair's is a hyper-local, student-focused investigative publication serving the Rutgers, New Brunswick community. Joe is also a 7-year veteran of the New Jersey Army National Guard. Joe, it's great to have you here. We're so thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. If anyone here today has questions or comments at any time, you're welcome to put them in the chat or use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. We'll be leaving time for questions and comments at the end as well. Without further ado, though, I want to turn this presentation over to Joe. All yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I love to see all the smiling faces in the crowd here. I appreciate you all. There's a lot of you here, so I'll try to get to your questions as quickly and as expeditiously as I can. I don't have slides today because I'm just going to sort of go through the sort of my mindset and some of the big pitfalls and opportunities that happen with hybrid events. Now, I watched your previous video on how to plan a hybrid event. Thought it was great. A lot of great advice. Highly encourage everyone to go over to the YouTube channel and watch that. It's short, it's quick, and there's a lot of information jam-packed in there. So one of the things that I'll be drawing from, despite not having slides, I do have notes here, and I do have an article that my supervisor / colleague and I, Stephanie Murray, put together after we ran a journalism conference in Chicago, which is a hybrid event. It was our first big hybrid event since the pandemic began. And it was also a 12-hour drive from where we live. So we rented a van, a Chrysler Pacifica, crammed all of our crap into the car and drove 12 hours with coworkers across the country to Chicago. And the reason we did that is because hybrid events require a lot of different moving parts, especially when you are using equipment, when you need to use equipment that can run heavy programs like Zoom, for instance, like we're on now, plus all the communications channels and, content sources that you're going to be running, like Google Chrome or any of your browsers, which also take up a lot of your computer power, or RAM, and Slack, or any of the number of those. So I wanted to bring my computer because I wasted more money than I should have on a nice, big, shiny, high power a desktop PC. So I didn't want to put my desktop, my baby, in the hands of some Delta Tarmac employee. So we packed all our stuff and we went to Chicago. went to the Columbia College of Journalism, and found out that the audio-visual setup that I had assumed that they had, and that way we had discussed that they had, was not able to do several of the things that you would expect to have in an auditorium setting. So before we get into all that, I'm just going to talk really briefly about the division of labor and the way that I think some of the things that are really important when considering how you're going to divide up who is going to do what, and who's going to be responsible for what at a hybrid event. Now, in the last video that, or the last session that I watched with you all, you talked a lot about the pre-work, a lot about the, why, what kind of event am I going to be doing? What do I want? What do I want the attendees to get out of this? What kind of experience is this going to be? And that is very important. That's also not something that that stops once the event starts. So you have to be willing to adjust on the fly. And I can only speak on my experience, but the way that we set it up, just briefly before we get into the actual execution, was a sort of 3-tier structure. So on the high end here, you have your super participants. This is somebody who is either going to be there in person, who's going to be at all the sessions, who is there for the experience, for the community, for the vibes, everything, right? They're going to be commenting. They're going to be sharing things. They're going to be networking. They're going to be posting on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever. They're going to be sharing. They'll be shooting videos for you, photos. This is your super participant. This is somebody who is there for that event. Now, in the middle tier there, you have somebody who is interested in this subject and the topic of your event. They're interested in meeting the people. They're sort of a mid-range participant, but they have other work to do. They're there for maybe a specific set or handful of sessions. But they're not a diehard, right? And then at the lower tier, you want to make sure. I mean, there are sub tiers in between these. This is a spectrum, really. But at the far end of the spectrum, the lower end of the spectrum of participation is I like to think of them as like a podcast listener almost. This is somebody who is interested in the material, maybe has one session they might be passionate about, but they're really going to have this on in the background. They're too busy. This is why hybrid events are actually really useful, because you can still capture those folks who won't be able to buy a ticket out to Chicago, who don't have 3 days to dedicate, time and to take off work or to push things aside. You want to structure your events so that there are opportunities for all three and everyone in between, all three stages of that type of participation, to be able to engage in certain ways. And so that's the mindset. That's the sort of, structure at the outset that we try to put into our events. And that means, part of what that means in the execution phase is making sure that any level, whatever level of participation that your attendees are at, they have the ability to participate or to find out how they can participate. And so while the pre-work is so crucial, because all of that has to be built in advance, but it also has to be managed on the fly. And that's where the division of labor comes in. So you want to make sure that a hybrid event doesn't just mean, oh, we have a live stream, and we're having this event in person. Now, that's a totally valid version of an event. I wouldn't consider that a hybrid event necessarily. I would consider that just an event with a live stream option, right? But in order for it to really truly be a hybrid event, it really is two separate events that are happening simultaneously, happen to happen in the same location and are broadcast out. So what that means is you need to have someone whose job it is, or a group of people whose job it is, to attend to the needs and participation pathways of the virtual attendees in the same way that you would for the in-person attendees. Now, this requires different things, different parts of your brain, different attention. But ultimately, it does come down to, if you are not being intentional, very intentional, and specifically catering towards the needs of those participants, then you're not going to succeed in the way that you'd like to, and it may end up be better off for you to simply offer a live stream option and move forward and focus your attention. And now our organization at the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University is a tiny 3 full-timers. We just got our 3rd full-timer this year, less than a year ago. And we have several part-time staff who are focused on projects. So when it comes down to people who can dedicate their entire day and focus to something, it's few, right? And really, in terms of the technical aspects, it's me. I'm the one. We also I don't have a broadcast background, although my boss Stephanie Murray does. We don't have thousands of dollars to throw at equipment and everything. So I try to do what I used to call back in 2015 when I did my first conference in Newark, backpack events or backpack journalism, right? Backpack equipment. So anything I can fit in a backpack or a bag. And that means, where is it? Over here. Ugh. That means this. That means maybe if you have an old phone, that means one of these nice, Logitech, these little Logitech, you've seen these before a million times. I'm sure you probably have one on your computer. If you don't have an external webcam, I highly recommend you get one. If not, just for the angle that you can focus them at, then for the quality. It also means external microphones. And that I want to stop and pause on that point in particular, because this is something that I've said a million times. And as soon as I say it, I'm sure you'll agree, you'll understand. I can watch a video at 144p. I can watch a really low resolution video, especially of a video of someone speaking or someone standing at a podium, as long as there's good audio. But I cannot watch a 4K video if the audio is trash. Yes. Actually having a camera, although, and they're reasonably priced. Having the laptop camera is nice if you'd like to show everyone the bottom of your chin. It's a very flattering angle for some. It doesn't work for me. But yeah, so audio is so crucial because it is, in most cases, literally piped right into people's eardrums. And if it's not, the quality of the audio is so crucial because it will turn people off so quickly. If I can't understand what you're saying, I can't consume the information. And that also, it's not just audio, it's capturing the audio and translating that or interpreting that into ways that are accessible for people who do have hearing impairments or loss of hearing or are deaf. And we're going to get into the accessibility aspects of events, something that I'm very passionate about and that I spent a lot of time thinking about and asking people who are smarter than me to help me with. But making sure that the information that you have and that your speakers or your presenters are providing to your attendees can get to those attendees in a digestible and understandable manner is very important, more so than video, I would say. I see in the comments somebody's asking, is there an external microphone you can recommend? There are several, and I can share an Amazon list or a list of equipment. I would also recommend going to wirecutter.com, which is owned by the New York Times. I basically just live my life, do whatever they tell me to do, buy what they tell me to buy. And listen, I haven't been let down yet. There are a variety of devices that I'm going to talk about that are under $100 in most cases. In a lot of cases, it's under like $75 or $50 that you can use to drastically improve the quality of your broadcast, of your presentation as well. Now, I'm going to focus a lot on the virtual aspect at first, and then I'll pepper in elements for the in-person, then we'll get to the in-person stuff at the end. Most people know how to run an in-person event, or at least can find resources and information on that. And I don't want to leave that out, but I'm going to focus on how the integration of the virtual stuff with the in-person. Okay, so right off the bat, we'll talk about the attendees first. We mentioned the 3 tiers and the sort of perspective and mindset that you want to have going into this. We want to talk about the people who are experiencing both, because a lot of times there's a tendency to assume that they're 2 separate groups. Like I said, it is basically like 2 distinct events, but it's not entirely true. It is a true hybrid because you have people who are going to be attending maybe the first day or maybe the first few sessions, they're there in person. But the second session, they just want to break. They don't want to be inside with everybody. Maybe they're a little still nervous about COVID. Maybe they are vulnerable or susceptible to COVID in ways that other attendees aren't. Maybe they just have things to do or they want to relax. Maybe they want to go into their hotel room for day 2 or back to their house and just listen in on certain sessions. All of that is a totally legitimate and fair way to approach attending an event. And what that means is that that person has to be able to access everything that you're providing in the in-person aspects of the event, and then be able to transition and access the hybrid events. So what does that look like? So that looks like, for instance, having space where people can go at the event and to network and move around and eat and do all these things and talk and not have to worry about being quiet, but also having things on site like a little pop-up studio, for instance, to allow people and speakers and presenters who are there to also engage with the virtual attendees. And one way we did this, as I mentioned, is to set up a separate room where we can standardize the equipment, we can standardize the microphone, the video setup, the backdrop, and we can bring the speakers or presenters into that space and then all they have to do is sit down. They can bring their laptop, they sit down and they do their piece. This allows us to standardize, like I said, the video and audio quality. It allows us to cycle the speakers through, and it also gives the attendees like a nice, cool neat little like behind the scenes look at how the sausage is made, what the process looks like. My go-to when it comes to events of any form is to drop the facade as much as possible. People like to know. I mean, I'm in my living room. You can see my crappy old couch over there that I got from my grandma as a hand-me-down. You could see my refrigerator. You know, we could say a lot about, you know, setting up the background and making your space look good. You can see the fan that I use behind me to keep me from getting too sweaty. There was a lot of like apprehension at the beginning of the pandemic, or there was a lot of pressure to act like everybody owns a broadcast studio set up in their home, or everybody is a professional broadcaster with a 4K video camera and a crew of people going. You saw that a lot. I see parallels to that, the sort of curated Instagram style of posts that people used to do. Everybody used to want to make sure everybody knew that they were actually a supermodel, or they were actually like a lifestyle guru, and they weren't just a regular human being. And that has faded away, as with Instagram culture, that has faded away, and people are much more interested in seeing the human beings behind the process. They're also much more likely to be forgiving for your events if you call out these issues. I don't know if you've ever listened to a broadcast on NPR or a show or a podcast, and you've heard the host start at the beginning and say, hey, just before we start, I'm Ira Glass. We got a little audio problem this time. It's going to happen about the 13-minute mark. Don't worry. We have dogs in the background. It barks. Stay with us. You know, those kind of like little call outs at the beginning, excuse my poor Ira Glass impersonation, but those kind of little call outs at the beginning are so crucial, because if you hear that at the beginning and say, hey, folks, there's some weird beeping, there's a construction going on outside, or it's literally about the thunderstorm, it just thundered right now. Call that out in the beginning. This happened to us in Chicago. Like I said, we found out that we couldn't hook up to the AV setup like we wanted to. They didn't have a mounted camera for us. So I had to run out and get a tripod and stick a little Logitech video camera, a Logitech webcam on a tripod in front of the, the audience, right? So call those things out and say, look, we're doing the best we can. Let us know if you have any issues and we'll address them. Another issue we had was because we couldn't hook up to their AV, we couldn't use their microphones. We couldn't broadcast the sound throughout the auditorium. So we had people who were sitting in the back, because we had everybody socially distanced in the chairs, who couldn't hear. So we anticipated this, and we brought a 50-pack of these cheap little earbuds so that they can sit back and tune into the Zoom on their phone without their video on or anything, and just listen to the audio from the Zoom, which was surprisingly synced up very well. This also is where we allowed people to access the live Spanish interpretation that we hired in a series of interpreters to provide live Spanish interpretation. So if you wanted to listen in Spanish, you could just pop an earbud in, right? Pop an earbud in and go sit somewhere else and listen to the interpretation, or go sit in the back. So it's these kind of hybrid elements that allow people to be flexible and allow you to be flexible. And all you have to do is acknowledge that at the beginning and say, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we're going to accomplish it. If you have any issues, let us know and we'll accommodate you. So that brings me to accessibility, because I want to get to this up front, because this is something that is often an afterthought, not just in journalism and media and the humanities, but really across the board. I have some of the stats right in front of me here. There are a large amount of people just in the United States alone that have some kind of disability or accessibility need. 20% of the people in the United States, it's almost 50 million Americans are deaf or hard of hearing. More than 1 million people in the US are blind, and 12 million have low vision impairments. More than 5 million in the US are English language learners, and estimated 40 million or more have some kind of learning disability. That means you enable the live transcript. You'll notice here during this session, we have a transcript. We have closed captions that are happening. These are automatic, but you can also go the extra mile and hire someone to do live closed captioning. It's much more accurate, and you're able to give the person a list of names and spellings of organizations in advance. Huge benefit. The folks over at Open News do this, and they make a thing out of it too. They acknowledge the person constantly throughout the event. People are allowed to follow along and ask them questions, and they engage that element in their actual event, and to bring the audience and the attendees in to be part of it. ASL interpretation is a big one. That was our first time in May in Chicago. This is our first time incorporating live ASL, and we had to do it in person and on Zoom. And the way that we navigated that was to put the ASL interpreter up on stage, just off to the left of the stage, section off an area right in front of that person for the seats, so that if anyone needed ASL interpretation, which we asked in advance on the registration form, just to make sure, if anyone needed it, they can come and they could sit in these special reserved seats so that they wouldn't have to squint or sit far back. At the same time, we have a separate video of the ASL interpreters that we can put up on Zoom and we can spotlight. Now, Gigi, I'm going to spotlight you real quick. In Zoom, you're allowed to spotlight videos, so you can put them side by side. And when you record them, which we'll talk about recording in the cloud or to your device next, but when you do that, you can spotlight videos. Now, Zoom doesn't have a feature that allows you to put them in a corner or to have them as a picture-in-a-picture, which I've been begging them to do. But when you are screen sharing, for instance, when you're screen sharing, the same kind of thing happens. So you'll notice, I'm about to screen share right now, you'll notice that when I screen share, you should see a Medium article here, and you'll see my video is up in the corner. And that, if I spotlight an additional video, now both videos are up in the corner. And so when we had someone screen sharing, we spotlighted the ASL interpreter and we spotlighted the speaker so that both are able to be seen. It's little things like this that you have to be aware of. And also you have to be aware of swapping out the ASL interpreters. They often don't do an interpretation live for lengths of more than 30 minutes at a time. And so while this is going on, you have to be communicating with all the people who are helping to run your event, whether it's someone you've hired to do interpretation, or it's your person who's manning the chat, or it's a person who is managing taking photos. I see we have a question. Gigi, go ahead, unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I just wanted to, demonstrate that feature also.
Yeah.
Can you please just quickly show everybody how you spotlight
Yeah, sure.
in your video? Thanks.
Absolutely. So how you spotlight, so it have to be more than 2 people in the room, which there clearly are here. You can either right click on the person's video and click add spotlight, or you can go to the participants menu in the upper right hand corner. And you can hover over the person's name. Oh, I don't know if you can hear the thunder, but it's coming down right now. Okay, good. You can click the little ... menu, and you can either choose to add or remove a spotlight. When you remove it, the person goes back and it remains there. You can also click replace spotlight. So now Gigi is on the screen and I'm not, but I'm still speaking, right? So I will replace the spotlight again. That is how that works. Any questions about that? Because I can fully go into detail on all the really cool things you can do in the Zoom controls. And we're almost done with the accessibility part. Okay, so secondly, access to the transcript. Whenever you post a video of your hybrid event or of your virtual event, please include a transcript with the video. And that can be auto-generated by the Zoom program itself, or when you record it, you can export the audio of your event and run it through a program like Otter, which auto-transcribes with a lot of accuracy. And I think Otter and Zoom are actually partnered. So it is Otter doing the transcription for the live closed captioning for Zoom. That's some of the accessibility. There are conversations going, across the board. We also did something for our event program and our schedule. We wanted to make sure that was accessible as well. A lot of people are starting to understand or become aware of the importance of something called alt text, which is for someone who uses a screen reader, who is a low vision or has some kind of, or maybe blind. So they're often using a screen reader, which is a text to speech program that just straight up reads often a very bad robot voice, reads at all the text on the screen. And so when you're using something like emojis to indicate like a key, so you have a little video camera key next to the ones that are going to be recorded, the sessions that are going to be recorded, that person, especially for us, where we had this will be recorded. This will be an in-person session. This will be a hybrid, virtual accessible. This will have a Spanish interpretation. We have this string of emojis. And after talking to people who work in accessibility, we found out that people who are reading or accessing our content via screen reader were hearing video camera emoji, two-person silhouette emoji, and there was no way to distinguish what that actually meant. So I won't get into the technical details of ARIA text and ARIA tags, but there are ways to make sure that your event is accessible across the board. I want to move on from accessibility because you see we're at the half-hour mark, but I want to stop and I want to just review the chat real quick. We had a note about an external mic. I said I'd provide that. We've had people take your phone to a podium to record. The phone The phone is so powerful, especially with a program like ManyCam, which is what I use, which is why you'll see in the background of my video, you see it's a little blurry. You'll see the, let me see if I can, yeah, so my background here, I can change the foreground of the blur, and I can change whether or not it is blurry and what the quality of that blur is. ManyCam is a program that allows you to trick Zoom into thinking that it's a webcam. And so that means I can switch my camera and have it show something like this, like a title card. I can have it show my browser without having to share my screen. And I can have it show alternate camera angles. So now, hello, you're seeing the video from my phone, which is wirelessly connected to my computer. So I can cut back and forth. I can do little transitions, little fades. What's my favorite one is the swipe, or the what's it called? There we go. The pop-up. There we go. So I can do these little transitions here. You can do all kinds of fun stuff with this, but ultimately what the most powerful part is, say I have slides that I'd like to show, right? And I don't want to share my screen because I have an ASL interpreter on the screen. I can add a spotlight for the speaker. So say Gigi is speaking and I'm executing slides now, right? Or I'm showing a screen next to her. Now we have, especially in the recording, we have a digital billboard on the left side or right side, whichever it shows for you, and we have our speaker. So now you don't have this tiny little square, which drives me nuts. I'll show you what it looks like. Gigi, I'm going to stop spotlighting you now. I'll show you what it looks like when you share screens. Let's see, Center for Cooperative Media. We just held the Democracy Day event yesterday, and look at this screen share here. I won't share the sound, but look what this looks like. Look how tiny. Look how tiny that video is on the right. So when that recording comes out, this is what it looks like. And then her name alone, Rachel's name alone, is taking up an eighth of the screen. So we don't like this. This is what we don't like. So instead, what we do is we take my screen or whoever is running with ManyCam, I spotlight somebody up next to me, preferably the speaker, and then I run the slides on the side and I cycle through them as they're talking. This creates, I think, a much more visually appealing. Yes, my phone is on a tripod right now, getting that angle. I will show you very briefly. It's up there on a little tripod / selfie stick that I love, and I'll share the link to that one as well, because it also has a Bluetooth receiver that allows you to set up as a tripod and take pictures without touching it and set the timer. Yes, so you can use that. You can also use that as an audience camera as well. And because it has a decent microphone on it, if you're on Zoom, I can take that audio camera, that phone camera, and I can go over to people, maybe plug in a little US or a little MP3 microphone. Oh, sorry, I'll unspotlight Gigi. And then I can actually get questions from the audience who are in person, and then allow that to be seen by the people on the virtual event and be heard by them, most importantly, and then have them respond. The same thing goes for having a virtual attendee. Now, if you're using Zoom webinar, this is a little more tricky. You have to promote people to a panelist or have them be a speaker or whatever. But using that second camera and using ManyCam as the switch between them, or even just having that person join from their phone as audience cam, and then keeping their video off or keeping them out of Many, M-A-N-Y, it's called M-A-N-Y-C-A-M. It's actually relatively inexpensive. You can do all the things I'm saying with something called OBS, which is a free version essentially, but it's a little bit more technically complicated and a little bit more intimidating, I think, for some people. ManyCam is a very user-friendly interface. I think the subscription for 5 licenses and I think up to 3 devices per license is like $120 a year. So it's not obscene. There it is. Thank you for posting that in the chat. We love it. I love it. But if I had to get rid of it to save money, I would go to OBS, Open Broadcast Software. It's an open source platform that's been around forever. It's loved by many Twitch streamers, YouTube streamers, and broadcast folks alike. And I recommend, if you're just getting started, that maybe you test out ManyCam and maybe test out OBS, watch a few YouTube tutorials on how to use it, because it's like one of those things. Once you get it, you'll get it and you'll be able to use it. But for those who are or need to do something now and don't have time to really learn a bunch of stuff, that's it. Thank you. Who don't have time to learn a lot of the technical aspects of this program, I would recommend starting with ManyCam. It's just a very clean, and it's got a lot of fun little effects and presets and stuff like that you can do. I have one of my favorites is the face masks that they have. So I can, I don't know how quickly it'll activate, but you can like put on different face masks. I don't want to traumatize you too much, but this one is always a little bit scary. But yeah, so they have everything that you can do here. You can have a lot of fun with it. Everything from that to a little top hat and a mustache. Not really important for a virtual event. It may be fun, nice for like a little laugh. We like to do attendee awards at the end of our events, especially our conferences. So the person who posted the most or was as active in the chat, the speaker who's we could listen to speak forever, those kind of things. And at the end, I like to wear a little fake tuxedo shirt, a little tiny microphone, and put the top hat on and announce the awards. You know, I'll modulate my voice or something. So like, yeah, you those kind of things you can do with ManyCam and other programs like VoiceMod. And that sort of brings me to my next point. Yeah, exactly. It's just like the 10-year-old on the family Zoom gatherings at the height of the pandemic. Correct. That 10-year-old was me at the beginning of the pandemic. The 31-year-old, God, I was 31, I think. Yeah, I'm 33 now. So I guess a 31-year-old on the thing. But yes, in fact, I actually bought early in the pandemic, all the green screens were sold out, obviously. So I went into Michael's arts and crafts and got a bunch of green foam board, and then just taped them up to my wall in the corner of my apartment and made a green screen out of that. I got a little lost for a while, let's just say. But that brings me to my next point is fun, joy. You have to have fun. You have to not take yourself so seriously. This is so weird. We're all living through our webcams. We've all been sitting in the same, give or take the same chair or space for the last 2.5 years. And as weird as that is, you have to be able to acknowledge that this is like hilarious in a lot of ways. It is, you cannot take these things too seriously. And that also ties into what I was saying about calling out the things that you're trying to do and being transparent and not trying to put on a facade that makes you seem more important than you really need to be. I'm not saying don't be professional. I'm not saying don't be clean. I mean, you can't see because I've figured out the field of vision of my camera and I've pushed all my crap out of the field of view. You know, I left my charging cable on the table over there. I'm not saying don't, be sloppy and don't be, courteous or, attentive, but you don't, but you want to have fun and you want people to know that this is, otherwise we'd be in the same room. I'm just a person. We'd be sitting in the same room. I can do like fun tricks and have fun with it, but I don't want to make it so stuffy and so boring and so rigid that this person inevitably slides all the way from what it could have been at that far end of the spectrum and a super participant all the way down to a more podcast style listening where they throw you on the Chromecast or they throw you on their phone and they're not watching, they're just listening and hoping for something good. So I want to pause real quick for any questions and any areas that anybody wants me to dive into more. I got plenty more to do, but I tend to talk fast. And then I sort of lose my train of thought. So I'll pause now and see if we have any questions or if anybody wants to ask about a particular subject. And then we'll talk about breaks after that, because it's a very important thing, managing the breaks and the breathing time. Ironically spoken, as someone who doesn't breathe in between sentences, it's important to be able to manage that time in a way. So we'll pause for a second. And I'll look through the chat here. There's a lot of messages. There's so many of you just firing off in the chat. We'll want to make sure we get to all of them. But if anybody wants to drop one in there or, unmute and just ask a question, that's fine too. My goodness, it is coming down. The thunder sounds like it's right outside my apartment. I got the warning from the AccuWeather app. It was like, hunker down. You got the heat and the storms.
Your audio must be really good, Joe, because at least I can't hear it at all. So
yeah, well, that's something. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll post a link in the chat to this this really good video. Do not be alarmed by the fact that the YouTube channel has the word crypto in it. I was immediately ready to run, but it's actually it's a really good video. It's like 8 minutes long. It's a really good video about how to set up your audio on your Zoom and your video so you get the best quality. Some of you, one of the tricks it showed me, which I didn't realize, I don't think a lot of people realize, that your video can look gorgeous on your computer, right? Mine looks great right now. The lighting looks decent. The quality, I have it like it's a 4K webcam that I just spent a little too much money on because I got bored. But you're likely seeing me in a maximum of 720p resolution. Which is not bad, but it's not high quality. You're not seeing the details of the stitching on the shirt as much. It may look nice, but the quality that you're putting into the computer and out into the internet is not the same quality that the viewers are receiving. And so that's important because you know, you might have certain assumptions on what people are seeing, and if you don't understand what they're seeing in return, then you might miss the mark by far, which is it brings me to my next important point, which is to test everything. And I don't just mean like make sure it looks good. I mean, test it on different devices, test it different orientations on your device. Zoom Webinar has a bunch of new features, which they always release like a week and a half before I have to do our annual Collaborative Journalism Summit, especially over the last 3 years. So that's always fun. But I highly recommend test it on a Windows computer, test it on a Mac, test it on a browser version of Zoom, which drives me crazy. But, you know, I didn't realize for the first couple months of the pandemic that so many of the reasons that we were having problems, technical problems, was because half the people were not using the Zoom app. They were viewing the Zoom presentation in their browser. They were simply staying in their Google Chrome or Safari browser, and they lost all kinds of functionality with the Zoom interface. That being, I think transcripts may be translatable now, but a lot of the breakouts, the reactions, you can't screen share if you're doing it from a browser. So we're talking not just attendees, we're talking speakers and presenters for these events, workshop facilitators who are trying to do this. And I'm saying, you just click the green screen share button. No, you could just share your desktop. And they're looking at me like I'm speaking a different language because they don't see that. And I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, it's the same program. You know, this is what you have to do. And you know, it just wasn't, because I didn't realize that they were using their browser version. When I asked if they were using the browser version, they said, I'm using Zoom. I'm using Zoom. They thought it was the app, the Zoom, because it had the little Zoom logo on it. And so everything from the terminology that you use to present your event, the terminology that and the technology that people are going to use to experience it, you have to test rigorously. And that, I mean, that takes time, that takes experience, and it takes the ability to understand. You really have to understand the platform that you're using. Okay, here's the link to the Zoom secret features that the video is called. Here we go. I highly recommend you watch that video. I think it's like 8 minutes long. It can't be that long. Yeah, it's 21 minutes long, way longer than I thought. I think there's chapters in it, so you could skip through. But yeah, oh, we have a question. Do you have recommendations between the various Zoom types of meetings? Yes, I do. So the choice you often are faced with is Zoom Webinar or Zoom Meetings. We're in Zoom Meeting right now, so I don't have as much control over the user experience or the attendee experience that I would with Webinar. Webinar gives you way more power as a host to control what the attendees see, what they hear, what it looks like, and what it looks like in the recording. The Zoom webinar is also so much more expensive, like obscenely expensive. And we only subscribe to it, or we buy it for our big annual conference, or if we're doing another, we've now, of course, started doing 2 conferences per year because, you know, I don't have enough stress. But for our big conferences where we want to turn basically Zoom into a virtual stage, and I mean that because Zoom really lets you can only see certain videos at certain times. Zoom Meetings now lets you do that, where I just showed you about spotlighting the video, and there's a thing called focus mode that essentially mimics that. But Zoom Webinar also allows you to control whether or not the attendees are seeing in gallery mode or active speaker mode, or if they follow the view mode of the host. So yeah, if I were in Zoom Webinar right now and I'm on gallery mode, you would be forced to see gallery mode. And that's the same thing that happens when you record when you record locally versus recording to the cloud, which is why I now like to record locally. And the reason is for several reasons. One is I'm getting the quality that I'm seeing. I'm getting the video quality that I'm seeing. I'm not having to pipe that through the internet, through the cloud, and then have that processed and reproduced in a cloud recording. Also, when you record locally, it straight up records what you see. So if you're screen sharing, if you're watching a screen share and you're in gallery mode, the recording will be in gallery mode. And that includes all the people who have their videos off and you're just seeing a little username or something, or a profile picture. That also includes, one of the things that I didn't realize and I found out the hard way was when I was recording from my main computer, I was temporarily popping into the interpretation channel to make sure that our Spanish language interpreters well, we're good, where that it still sounded good. And so unfortunately, in the recording for the Collaborative Journalism Summit at parts, all of a sudden it's Spanish, and with no warning, no indication, all of a sudden it's boom, it's, you hear Spanish audio, and then it switches back. Again, it was like it's 7 hours of video and then 5 hours for the first day. So as I'm going through, I'm editing this video afterwards, I'm like, what's happening? What the hell is this? And I realized, because when you record locally, you are recording locally, everything. So that's really important as well. And that with webinar, that's a somewhat similar comparison, because webinar is a very locked down. We like to call it having like a virtual stage, because you have to promote people to speakers. There are different roles. There's the host, there are panelists, as they call them, not speakers, and then there are audience members. And the audience members, you can allow them to speak. They won't be able to use their video. You can, same way you would spotlight their video, you'd go to the participants menu and say, allow permission to speak, and they will pop up and just their audio will show through. You can also promote people to a panelist, and then when their video is on, the attendees will see them, but when the video is off, they won't. Now, when they're a panelist, they get, yes, I will, Montreal, I will absolutely drop recommendations for audio. When you're a panelist, if their video is off, they're basically backstage. They're behind the scenes. The attendees can't see them, but they still have access to the panelists and hosts only chat. You can prep them in advance. You can pull them up on stage. We like to have our attendees raise their hand, use the little reactions to raise their hand. Which one thing that is different with Zoom webinar is the attendees cannot see the participants list, or you can prevent them from doing so. So when I say, okay, our speakers, please identify themselves for the next panel, boop, 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 all the hands go up that I want. I promote them to panelists. I keep their video off, and now I can direct message the group of them together and say, okay, for our lightning talks, Dave, you're up first. Sandra, you're up next. Bah, 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 bah. I'm going back and forth there. All of this is done behind the scenes, and it gives you a much easier, much more control over the environment and the experience that the attendees don't even see. So if you have the money and you have the expertise and the time to run prep sessions with the speakers, because they're probably not used to that as well. We do rehearsal sessions where it's like 15 minutes. This is how it works. This is the notification you're going to get when the host requests you to turn your video on. Do not turn your video on and unmute yourself and say, hey guys, I'm on the panel now, before you're prompted. If you can do that, I recommend Zoom webinar for that. If you don't have that time, or if you don't really care that much about it, and oftentimes this is the case, Zoom meeting will do just fine. This is just fine. You have the spotlight feature that allows you to bring people up and down. You have the focus mode, which allows participants to only see spotlighted speakers, hosts and co-hosts, hosts and co-hosts, and shared content. You're usually going to be fine with that. But yeah, those are the two that I usually use. There's like Zoom rooms, and there's, we haven't gotten into breakouts and how annoying those are. If you don't do them right. We haven't talked about Zoom apps. There are a bunch of apps, like little games you can have everybody play, the polls and everything. All that stuff is fine. That's something you can figure out. You go on the Zoom website. They have a bunch of really great content and tutorial content to help you with that. But the major difference, I would say, is the amount of control that you have as a host over the experience of the participants. Now, we have 10 minutes left. So I know I've neglected the in-person part, and for good reason. Like I said, in-person events aren't new. The biggest point that I said toward the beginning still holds true, though. You have to treat them with the same level of intention, attention, and care as you would two separate events. Bridget Thorson has a really great thread about this that she posted on Twitter, and I'll share the link to that now, where she talks about, some of the struggles at some professional risk for sharing this too. I want to put a little, here is a thread on intentionality for hybrid events. And again, this will all be shared. I'll share all these links and resources with you all after the session is over. Another important thing to do to follow up with your attendees, both in person and virtual, to give them resources and links shared in the chat, yada, yada, transcript, recording and everything. But I would recommend reading this and diving into this, talking about inclusion and being intentional for each phase of the planning, asking questions like, who do we want to participate? What do we want to accomplish? What formats will help achieve those goals? What barriers to participation can we remove? A lot of these things you all discussed in your last session on planning these events, but they continue to come up throughout the execution of the event as well. Last couple of things. I mentioned talk about having fun, and I told you I talk about managing breaks. These are two things that overlap often, but are not the same. So on the one hand, give people time to rest, give them time to break, to go continue talking. A lot of times people will, and if you can't do that, give them a space to break off and continue conversations that ended prematurely or ended because of the scheduling. A lot of times you'll see people, because it's virtual, they just want to go bah, 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 event, session. And when they do a break, it's like, okay, have fun, 15 minutes, go stretch or something, get some water, use the bathroom. And that's fine. You do need to have, disconnect times. That's very important. You want to strategically place those. But sometimes people are there to participate. Like I said, that spectrum from one end to the other. Say I'm here for one session, and I want to hear Heather Bryant talk about collaborative journalism. I want to hear how partnerships form. I want to really get into the weeds, and 45 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes, whatever it just isn't enough. And I don't want to sit on the spreadsheets when I do want to sit on a spreadsheets panel. That would be great. But I don't want to do that when I'm here for Heather. So what we do is we create an overflow room, or an off-ramp, exit ramp, which is what I like to call it. And we tell people at the end of each session, we say, okay, so this is great. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But for those of you who want to continue having this conversation, there's a Zoom link in the dashboard, which I'll show you in a second. You want to organize all your information. There's a Zoom link on the attendee dashboard that shows you that you can click on, and it's an open, unstructured room where our speaker from the last panel will be hanging out for another 15 minutes or 20 minutes. You can go there, you can have direct conversation. It's a Zoom meeting. There's no stage. Everybody's on equal footing. Ask questions of them and continue this conversation, or continue to network and connect around that subject. That is a great use. It doesn't require you any additional, human power or attention. Although on certain topics, you want to make sure that you have some moderation, or at least supervision, so that there's no harassment, obviously. But it's a very low impact way to ensure that your attendees can get the most out of an event, especially on a particular topic. I mentioned the dashboard, and I want to show that to you very quickly. This is something I'm very proud of. I've been using it for 3 years now on our events. I've now created a mobile version and a web version. Or a desktop version. This is the desktop version of that. This is called, this is made on Canva. And each one of these, these used to be, I removed the links in case somebody got to it. Each one of these is a button that opens up a tab to the schedule, to the list of speakers, right? All this stuff here for our event, a list of sponsors. We also have a floor plan of the building that they're in, so you can look at the event space and you can determine what's what. You can nominate someone for an attendee award. Like I said, this form might be closed. No, it's not. You can nominate people for the Model Attendee Award. We also created something called an Asks and Offers board, which is an asynchronous form of communication that allows us, that allows people to drop and leave comments here, or post jobs. You can upload all different kinds of content. This is Padlet.com. This is free. I haven't paid for this at all. You can only have 3 boards at once. But why just get rid of the old one or reappropriate it when it's 2 years old? You can post all kinds of content here. You can comment and This is a really cool way for people who may not be able to join you at any particular time, but would still like to post job openings or have conversations in an asynchronous manner. Something I wouldn't expect anybody to do, but I also like to do because I like to procrastinate the other work that I'm doing. I created custom songs and tracks to use during break periods and intermissions that feature audio from our previous conferences. So really powerful speeches or presentations that people have given, I've clipped them and I've turned them into, a little soundtrack. I'll show you briefly what that is, what that sounds like. So here's one I did for Brandy Collins Dexter. And this will play during the intermission. You'll hear her voice. Speaking. No?
Way to distribute disinformation is to strengthen local news.
Right, so I've peppered in little bits of her speeches from the past. So it brings the people back to the subject at hand, but gives them something to sort of play in the background. I try not to play it too loud, although that might have been blasting. But it reincorporates elements from your previous events, and it's fun. It's cool. People are like, wow, I didn't know my talk was going to be turned into a thing. And we'll ask permission to do it and to show it. But it's a cool way to sort of incorporate the fun, right? So that dashboard and all that stuff is on there. And it allows people to have a central place to refer to all the information they might need, any way they can contact the speaker or the organizers and everything. A lot of our events are under 100 people. This is super cool, but seems relevant to larger events. A lot of it is relevant to larger events, although it can be used for smaller groups. So you'll send out like an agenda for an event in advance. That's always a good one. If you don't do that, I highly recommend creating a brief agenda, even if it's a little PDF with a schedule of what people are going to expect. But if you want to go beyond that, you can use Canva or something like that. I prefer to use Canva, and then like bit.ly for a little link shortener, and just create a link like bit.ly / I don't know, NJCH dashboard, right? Or is it New Jersey Council of Humanities? Yeah. NJCH dashboard. And then people can easily remember it, and you can share it in the chat throughout the event, and make sure that they always have access to that. We also did something. We also created a little, again, this is probably more for larger events, but we created a Google map with a bunch of different things on the sidebar here, where you can look that are relevant to the event. We have places and attractions they can go to, bars and restaurants. We have the event locations, both City Bureau and Columbia College. And then we have hotels in the area that people can use. And all of this is really easily, you can make this so easily with Google Maps, and it just gives people a really easy a way to refer to what's going on. We also, like I said, I created a mobile version, which looks a lot better when it's in mobile, you'll see. Because a lot of people are going to be accessing this from their phones. So now this is much easier to see. When it's the desktop version, it's weird. We have the password for anything that's password protected, because we don't want any random person to be able to join and Zoom bomb us or whatever. All of this can be found here, including how to contact the staff or how to subscribe to our collaborative journalism newsletter, as I said. But for smaller events, this can still be really useful, because you'll just have different information on the dashboard. That's all it really comes down to. And you can organize it differently. And yes, I will absolutely be sharing what I just spoke about. In fact, I'll post a link in the chat. Every time we do one of these, we write in Medium about how we did it and how we did our hybrid event. There's actually one more I'll post from 2020. This one from 2022 is a lot more raw and like vulnerable, I would say, because of how many things we sort of messed up or things didn't go the way we wanted. So I think this one's a little bit more useful because he talked about some of the challenges. But the first one, which I'll find in a second, is a little bit more. This is the first virtual event that we did for a large conference. But yeah, Gigi, you have a question?
Actually, more of a comment. And this is coming from the question in the chat about smaller events. And I haven't had a chance yet to read through that entire Twitter feed that you shared with us, Joe. But that's connecting to me, like thinking about those two things together, about intentionality.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good point. This is certainly something we're talking about and thinking about at NJCH as well, is like, what is the intention behind our gatherings? And,
yes.
And ours are small too. They are. Like, occasionally they're really big, but usually they're really small. So how can we create a space that encourages dialogue? I think that's really, really, really hard in a virtual space.
Very hard, yeah.
And I think, and then there was a question that I had that I was thinking about that I'd love to throw out to you, if you don't mind, Joe,
Please.
As well, for discussion actually from anybody, is I think this is changing constantly.
Yes.
During this world that we're living in. We were even in attendance at events, right? We were seeing lots of people jumping into events early, and we're seeing a lot fewer now, frankly, especially on virtual events, but the hybrid events as well. There's a lot of push to go in person, and I think just general low attendance, which I suspect is at least in part from fatigue and rapid, big to-do lists, and everybody just trying to keep up with a lot a lot at once.
And now you can go to a million events. Yeah, now you have a million events you can go to, so you don't feel a lot of pressure. There's not as much FOMO, in those.
Totally.
Kind of, yeah.
Totally.
No, you're
So
absolutely right.
I'm curious if that has, people have definitely come to love the both and, or the, like, I can't make it last minute. Will there be a recording? I got several messages about that just today.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you and your colleagues are thinking about this, if you're willing to share with us about the Center for Cooperative Media.
Yeah, so we actually, I've noticed that a lot as well. There's a lot of times when we have like a press briefing or a virtual like a webinar, a lot of the virtual events are subject to this, where people, and I've done this, where I can't attend this event, but I'm going to sign up, I'm going to register in the hopes that they'll send out a recording and I'll watch later. I don't think that's a problem at all. That's part of hybrid events, is the ability to be flexible, to be more accessible. I can't make it. I can't go in person. I can't get off work that time, or something happened last minute. Send me the recording. You know, there is something to say that can be said about creating a space that is in the present. And we try to do that. We try to give a reason for people, which is why we don't live stream our events publicly. We do share the recording, but we don't live stream them publicly because we want to give it, first of all, we want to create a more intimate feeling so that people know that this is a community, a micro pop-up community that we're creating right now. We're all gathering to celebrate this purpose, this topic, right? Or to engage in this discussion. And we want you to be present. We want you to be there. We know not everybody can be, not all the time, and that's fine. But if you want it for the content, by all means, you can watch the recording. But if you want it for the engagement and the experience, there has to be some. Priya Parker is a brilliant person who wrote an author who wrote a book called The Art of Gathering, and I posted the link in the chat. I have read it 3 times now, and I cannot wait for her to release a post-pandemic edition because I need to hear from her on how hybrid events. And I'm waiting on bated breath for it, and I will devour it when it comes out. Yes, so we're reading it again. Yeah. And she talks about the different sizes that make a good gathering. I think it's like 12, it's 25, and then it's 75 and above, or something like that. I'm definitely getting that wrong. But that part of the chapter really talks about the exclusivity as a form of maintaining an inclusive environment or an intentional environment. Exclusivity and it is your bouncer, I think she calls it. I'm definitely getting that wrong. But she talks about the concept of a bouncer and the concept of being intentional about who you invite and what you ask them to do when they're there and what form that takes as a form, an exclusion as a form of sticking up for your attendees, of providing value to them, because they don't just want to be, sworn by anybody. They want to be in a room with people who are engaging and are interested in the topic that everyone is interested in. And I think that's fine. I think creating or understanding and recognizing the reality of how people engage with virtual and hybrid events doesn't mean you can't just cling to the old way. You can't be so protective of your space and of your attendee numbers and everything that you forget that that's just not how people consume stuff. I would much rather be able, touch somebody with our content or with our information and be able to affect their lives or give them something that they need 2-3 months after it actually went down when they watched it on our YouTube channel, right? And they say, "Oh my God!" And we've seen it in the comments. One of our most watched and commented videos is from like 7 or 8 years ago. Our old director, how to start a local news site, and it's just a video of her talking. And time again, everybody's on there like, "Oh my God, this is so great! I'm so glad I was able to access this." And that was before the pandemic. That was just a recording of a talk she gave at a podium, and it's great. And they can't comment, they can't ask her questions directly, but they're still getting something from that. So, all right, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining. We'll see you later. I do appreciate it. Yes, we will send all this out. But yeah, send the recording. But I do understand that the desire to create a present here and now kind of environment. And I think that is important too. So it's about balancing that. And it's about like coming up with ways to, reassure the folks who do attend in person and, at the time that this is a space where we are going to be engaged. We're going to be focused. We're going to be doing this and then allow other people to access it later.
That's awesome. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so glad that you mentioned Priya Parker and you're talking about intentionality. Yes, exactly. Praise. Praise. Such an important framing for what we're talking about now. And I think the other thing that's really striking me, Joe, and everything that you're talking about is, and it's related to this idea of intentionality, right? Not everything doesn't have to be everything to everyone, right?
Thank you. Yes.
It's just, and we can make decisions about this.
That's okay. It's okay.
In real time, like it's okay. It's totally fine. In the same way that when we're in a, somebody can have a program that I'm like, oh, that sounds like it's really great for other people.
Not for me.
I hate it. I'm a performance studies person. I have a background in theater. I do not care how many times you tell me how important the plays Hamlet and Waiting for Godot are. I 100% agree with you, and I don't want to ever have to watch either of them ever again. Yeah. I just hate them. I don't think they're terrible. For me, it's a Christmas Story. I just hate them.
Or It's a Wonderful Life is the one for me that I can't. And A Christmas Story, I can't. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, I have a background in musical theater, community theater as well, and you're hitting on all the right cylinders there. That definitely resonates. But yeah, I think really, it just comes down to being human and understanding that it's not that serious. It is when you're talking about making sure people are comfortable and feel safe, obviously. But when it comes to your own importance and your own like stature and grandeur, drop that. Like just get over that. Ask people what they want and what they need and listen to them, and then try to do that, and then explain and call out your shortcomings. Don't agonize over them. Don't don't freak out about it and get so wrapped up in every little thing that goes wrong, because like theater, most of the time, the audience, your biggest screw up, the audience has no idea you skipped that line. They have no idea you messed up your blocking or your stage directions. The stage manager's freaking out and pulling their hair out in the wings, right? They're going to freak out, and you are in that role. And I often have to remind myself, because I sort of act as a stage manager for these kinds of events. And I know you missed that mark. You were supposed to stand over here. The blocking is clear. Like the line was this. Nobody in the audience knows. Most of the time they don't care. They just want to make it's how they leave. The feeling they have when they leave should be one of inclusivity, of participation, of invigoration. You want to reach out and touch the parts of their brains and engage with the thoughts in their minds that are the most important. All the rest of the stuff, nobody is going to remember. Oh, the mic was a little weird at that point, or oh, there was a flicker to Spanish halfway through, and I didn't. Nobody's going to remember that. I'm going to remember that on a random Tuesday in the shower. I'm going to be like, oh, I'm a cringe. But most of your attendees, the core of what they get will be the feeling of how they felt when they think about their experience at your event. So did you take care of them? Did you see them at what they need, their human needs? Or were you so focused on making everything look pretty and look serious and professional that they didn't actually take away anything from it? And so that's what I will leave you with at that.
Awesome. Comfort, access, flexibility. These are the things.
Yes.
These are the hallmarks.
Humanity.
Of a good humanity, 100%. Right? Let's not lose our humanity in that, especially when you're talking to the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. I mean, come on.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Pretty basic. Well, Joe, this has just been a really, really, really great discussion. I think there's so much wisdom here, so much to think about. I just wanted to remind everybody one more time that we will be collecting all these resources. We create not only the recording of the video and the transcript, but also some notes with all of these links that Joe has provided, as well as resource lists that he is going to share with us of like great tech that can really help you along with this. We'll have all of that available on our website in the next few days, as soon as everything is collected and uploaded. Probably by the beginning of next week is realistic there. You'll be able to find this information, future In the Weeds events, at njhumanities.org. It's under Programs in the Weeds. And I'll include the link in the chat there as well. We're actually going on a little bit of a hiatus for In the Weeds. This is our last program for a few weeks, but we're going to be back in the fall with more capacity building and skill building workshops and programs for everybody out there in New Jersey and beyond. And let's see, what else did I want to say before we, oh yes, if you would like to, we strongly recommend that you follow us on social, and also go to our, sign up for our mailing list, which you can do on our website, njhumanities.org, to hear about everything that's happening with the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, including In the Weeds. Joe, I want to thank you one more time for being here today and sharing your knowledge. And I think even more than your knowledge, your learning, your experience, your candor. That's a huge part of this, right? How are we willing to be candid about this? Thanks for sharing these links in the chat as well. I really appreciate it. If you have a suggestion for a future In the Weeds program on the website, you can actually share that recommendation as well. So don't hesitate to, or you can email me to do so as well. Please don't hesitate. We would rather give you what you want than try to figure out from our end what you might want. I'm going to share the link to In the Weeds in the chat as well. I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and we'll talk to you soon.